All right, and we're live. Welcome everyone to the Juju office hours for what day is it today?
6/20, 30th.
It is 30th of July. Awesome, great. This might be weird for everyone, but Marco's visiting me here. We're having a little mini sprint here on a feature that we want to deliver to you guys that we're not quite ready to reveal, but will soon. So I'm George Castro.
Marco Cheppy.
And the other three guys, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
All right, I'm Matt Bruzek. I'm a Juju Charmer.
I'm Charles Butler. I as well am a Juju Charmer.
I'm Corey Johns, and I'm a Juju Charmer, Big Data Charmer.
And Jay Wren, as usual, just hanging out. Nothing to contribute.
Yeah, I'm Jay Wren, and I'm just hanging out with nothing to contribute.
Awesome, awesome. And we have a dog. His name's Oscar. He's going to wander in and out, talk about DevOps a little bit. No, just kidding. We've had a ton of stuff update since our last office hours at the beginning of the month. Usually these office hours we do about 2 a month. I'm going to start with you, Chuck, because this was a big week for the Kubernetes community, and I want to make sure we talk about it a little bit. After that, Corey will hit up the big data stuff and maybe some of the composability things you've been working on. And then Jay Ran at the end, you can add in whatever it is you do around here. We don't know. And then we've got a Juju Core stable release. Marco's got the release notes here, mostly bug fix release, but we'll touch on that a little bit. So with that, Chuck, Kubernetes 1.0, what does this mean to me? Kind of explain to me what Kubernetes is and tell me how you're helping me try out this exciting new technology that everyone keeps talking about.
All right, so if you haven't heard about Kubernetes by now, what it is, it's essentially a product from Google that allows you to commoditize compute resources leveraging containers. And what this means is that you can now take units that are in the cloud and add them to a cluster and have some intelligence around them, such as resurrection. So you've deployed a service and it dumped a stack trace in production and this tanked your service. Well, Kubernetes will do its best to resurrect the service, bring it back online using a fresh container, relink it back to the existing ancillary services that it needs to talk to, and keep rolling and hook it back into your load balancer. So that's just one of the features of Kubernetes. And what's so exciting about this is that they just recently, last week, landed 1.0, which is Google saying that this is now production ready for you to start deploying it, kicking the tires on it, and starting to run some of your production workloads on it. And what's great about that is that we are there right in the repository as well as in the Juju Charm store for you to go ahead and deploy this in a reference architecture that we've been working on for the last 6 months. We have 2 flavors of this. We have this from the perspective of a consumer. So as you don't necessarily want to, get your hands dirty with Go code or do anything crazy like that, you can just Juju quick start cs-kubernetes/Kubernetes type cluster, and you will get a reference architecture of Kubernetes deployed with one etcd node, a Kubernetes master, which is the API, which is the brains of the service, and 2 compute nodes that are pre-configured and jacked into the Kubernetes master, so you can log right into your Kubernetes master, run kube control, and start kicking the tires, deploying services and seeing what's going on. We also have a lot of examples that are shipping with it, because we are shipping the entire Kubernetes repository with these charms. We're also starting to deploy what I'm calling KubeStack, so that we've got a reference implementation in-house, and the other members of the Juju team can start leveraging this. And if you're on the community and you want to know some of the interesting stories about this, make sure that you follow up with us and pound Juju. The second side note to this is that we also have an integration from the perspective of a developer. This is also a great developer.
Before you get to that real quick, I have some questions for you from people that might want to try Kubernetes. So, okay. What are the minimum amount of nodes I need to try these? You mentioned etcd, a master. How many slaves? 2, you said?
2 slaves. So the way that we ship the bundle today is with 4 nodes. That's a minimum machine configuration. Now, this is great for you to kick the tires. If you want to scale this up into a production-ready cluster, I highly recommend that you add 2 units to the etcd node. And whenever you need to scale this, you just simply add units to the Docker service that's in the cluster. That may not necessarily be immediately obvious to you unless you're looking at the Juju GUI. Reason being is that the Kubernetes minion bolts into the Docker charm as it sits today, and that's what controls the scale-out scenario for your elastic compute.
So people are they're just not simply adding slave nodes. What's the ratio of number of etcd? Like how do I know when I could just add slave nodes, and when do I know that I need etcd, because etcd is the thing talking to all of them and also needs to scale? Like, what's the magic ratio? And obviously you guys have this written down in the README, right?
Right. So the magic ratio for etcd is 3 nodes per quorum. So you can run a single node, that's fine, but if it goes away, that's it. You've tanked, you've lost some data, you're going to have a problem in production. If you run 3 nodes, it will run quorum, and your data will be distributed, and you've got a much fault-tolerant and HA-compliant deployment. Now, as far as the Kubernetes nodes that are going to be running your Elastic Compute, those do not have to have quorum, and you're free to add as many of those as you see fit. You can scale that up and down as your needs change.
Okay, so keep etcd odd, and then the amount of the reason I asked that question, you mentioned only 2 compute nodes, and I was like, how do they get quorum? So the compute nodes themselves.
Right, you can start with just 1 compute node, when you can scale it from there, or you can start with 50 compute nodes if you've got a very, very large workload that you need to get started with.
Okay, and then once I've got my little setup, with a few computers or a few KVMs or whatever I'm using, what is like the typical hello world people run in Kubernetes?
There is a guestbook demo, and that's outlined not only on kubernetes.io, but we also have that outlined in our docs for getting started.
Okay.
What you do is you CD into the directory that actually, let me resize my terminal, and I will outline how to get there.
Yeah, that'd be great. Because you're making it kind of really easy to do Kubernetes, but I'm not going to set up Kubernetes just for the sake of it, right? I want to actually run something awesome on it. So, like, is there a set of, is there an elk stack? Like, how do you plop? In generic terms, you don't have to get into details because this isn't going to be a how to use Kubernetes session, but where do people go after we've given them the box? You've opened the box, we've given you Kubernetes, it's awesome, we can auto-scale it with Juju, we can do all these things. What's the next logical step there? Am I trying an elk stack? Am I trying Cassandra? Is there a Mesos thing I can plug into that? Just kind of give people a place to go.
So what I've done so far is I've just SSH'd into my Kubernetes node. Now, to answer... You just asked a lot of questions in one breath.
Yeah,
so
I know.
Let me decompose this and say that for all the ancillary services like your Elk stack, this fully integrates with Juju. So if you want to deploy the Elk stack into your Kubernetes cluster, you can do that, but I don't recommend that. Deploy that with Juju and use a connector that we have called Logsfile, which will ship all of your container logs into the Elk stack that's being run by Juju. And you've got your logging infrastructure isolated and separated from your Elastic Compute resource.
That is hot action. You should have mentioned that first.
All right, so I SSH'd into my first Kubernetes node, Kubernetes/0, and on this particular node, in this particular configuration, I am in the wrong node. So let me Juju SSH Kubernetes master.
So those following along, the /0 is the unit name, or the unit number.
That is correct. And you only need one master.
Kubernetes master, right.
Right, and you only need one master, so it's feasible to assume that it's just going to be 0. And we have this resource available to us called kubectl. And what kubectl is how you're going to interface with everything. So the first thing you might want to do is check how many pods or services you actually have. So if you run kubectl get nodes, this is going to tell me how many actual slaves I have, or minions I have connected, nodes connected to my master. If I run kubectl get services, it's going to tell me what services I'm running. Now, by default, you're only going to see one, which is the API server, and this is going to surface in the environment. If you run kubectl get services, or I'm sorry, get pods, kubectl get pods, you're not going to have anything running. So the way that Kubernetes works is that you define the basic building blocks of your container infrastructure in pods, and then you group those with services. So we ship the Kubernetes code in /opt Kubernetes, and if you cd into examples and then guestbook, you're going to see a couple files in here. You're going to see some Redis controllers and a front-end controller. So if I run kubectl create techf front-end controller.yaml, it's going to go ahead and launch the front-end controller for a guestbook. And we can do this again for the service, which will actually declare the service. And I'm not going to deploy this entire stack and wait for it to stand up. I did that in a video earlier last week, and that is available on Insights. But if you run kubectl get services, we're going to see that front-end controller surface right here. It's going to tell me that I have port 80 exposed in my environment, and that this is the IP address that I can use to reach that service. If I run kubectl get pods, it's going to show that it's currently spinning up 3 different webheads, and then once the Docker image is finished being pulled, these will set to online, and the status will be changed from pending to ready. So in a very short breath, that's a great way to get started with Kubernetes, and then once those services are online, you can curl those and start to play with your environment. More information is available in the docs that we have shipping with the charm.
Awesome, awesome. And then if you would in IRC, please post where people can get the starter Kubernetes bundle, I guess, and then people would just scale out from there. I guess it doesn't make sense to give people big bundles right out of the box.
Right.
You can just scale up as they need them.
One thing is, Bruiser, you did a lot of work on the secondary story. If you want to give a brief overview of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that's for people who want to consume Kubernetes.
Right.
I just want to try it. I'm awesome. I keep hearing my friends are talking about it. I want to try it. This
Right.
next one is for people who actually want to hack on Kubernetes. Like, I want to solve this Kubernetes problem. Okay.
Right. So we're in the Kubernetes upstream project. So if you want to get Kubernetes, you can go and branch it from Google. Let me share my screen here. And you have the charm in the bundle right inside there. So this is Git. So if you just clone the Git repository, GitHub, Google Cloud Platform, Kubernetes, it'll give you this directory here, and you can do hacking. You can build Kubernetes, whatever you need. The really fast way to do a build for developers is to export equals to Juju, and then you just, like every other way to do a Kubernetes cluster, you say cluster and you say kube up .sh, and that will use Juju to deploy the Kubernetes from your laptop. So it'll compile the binaries in Go, and then it'll put those out into the charm, and then it deploys it in a small cluster that you can try it, and try it out, see what happened. Did you break something? Try it again. You can destroy that cluster by running cluster/kube down.sh, and it will get you a development environment, and it'll deploy the cluster, and you can see your changes immediately. So
Okay, so you can grab this from tip, right?
right, and it puts the stuff are located in the Kubernetes directory. There's a cluster Juju directory, and from there you can look at the bundle. It's deploying the bundle in the bundles directory. It happens to be local.yaml, and this is right in the Kubernetes directory right now. It also has a README in case you need some, you want to read the docs. And then the charms themselves are under the charms directory. There's the let's go on trusty. Yep, there's Kubernetes master in there, but you don't have to know anything about the charms or anything. You just run kube up like you would to run any old Kubernetes stand up for a cluster. You just have to set the provider to Juju and kube up, and it will run Kubernetes, and you can see your development code running in a cluster right away. So that's already in the Kubernetes repository. That's the default way that Kubernetes is built. In that bundle, it's building on your laptop and then deploying into the cloud. It's a little bit faster to do it like that than it is to build it in the cloud, but because you have more resources likely on your laptop. So.
Okay. So Jay has a quick question there. Is it possible to deploy that cluster locally on his laptop into LXC containers when you export Juju and that's a local provider? Will that just work?
No, technically, that's a really good question. We can't run this on the local provider because Docker doesn't run inside LXC. However, I am using the KVM provider on Juju right now, and the KVM provider works awesome. So you can do it, but you need to do the KVM provider, which, as you can see here, I've got just one instance started. It's the GUI right now, but I'm using a KVM provider on my local machine, which that has better isolation, so that you can run Docker containers inside there.
Right. And on a typical laptop, I think you have a ThinkPad or something. About how many KVM containers can you run? Can you run a full cluster?
I can. Yeah. With 2 gigs each, I can run a full cluster. Yep.
Okay, that's good to know. KVM provider. Who knew?
Cool. Well, I did. We did. We always know that.
All right. So future stuff. Now that Cubes has got 1.0 out the door, give Give me your TLDR. 6 months. What's next? What am I looking forward to here? You guys doing libswarm also? Like what cool containery things you guys working on next to bring me more of this hotness?
We're currently working on getting E2E done on Kubernetes, which means we're going to be fully upstream compliant. There's a couple things that they have as requirements to be, I forget the term that they use, but we still need to include SSL verification, username, password authentication as well. Now, the next big thing that you can probably expect to see out of us is we've already got some work landed against Swarm, and you're going to see some of those components start to land, and the entire ecosystem around that start to mature a little bit more. We're also going to be doing some work based on what Corey is going to be covering later and providing primitives for charmers that will help them accelerate their charming process.
Right. Okay. Cool. All right. Any last words from you, container guys, before we move on to big data? All right. Awesome work, guys, and congratulations to the Kubernetes guys for hitting 1.0. Now we're moving on to big data. Corey, what do you got for us today?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned in the last session, we have a bunch of bundles up on the Charm store for the Apache Hadoop core components and some of the additional components that you can attach to it. This week we've got some great additions by Kevin for the Flume ingestion side of the story, ingesting data from Twitter or from syslogs very easily. Those aren't quite approved into the recommended namespace in the store, but they're in the Big Data Dev namespace already. So it's got some really exciting abilities to bring in data from different sources, and we're going to obviously be expanding on that as we go. But this is our first Flume ingestion set of charms. You guys
We're still here.
Yeah, sorry.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got barking dog syndrome. Keep talking.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I mean that's mostly what I wanted to cover in the big data because I didn't want to rehash what we had from last week. But to change gears a little bit, something that I've been working on that Chuck alluded to is the idea of the reactive pattern and relation stubs and charm composer is all kind of tied together. But this is a new approach to writing charms that kind of the idea is to structure charms in layers, kind of similar to how Docker containers are constructed in layers, but with far more flexibility. Well, not more flexibility, a lot of flexibility for the charms to bring in different components, pull in resources, and have them all be managed by the Juju Compose or Charm Compose tool. And then that ties into the idea of relation stubs, where we have implementations for existing relation interfaces that are written by the people who come up with the interfaces in the first place. So instead of in current charm world, when you want to use a particular interface to another charm, you sometimes have to read the code or at least their documentation and figure out exactly what keys they're going to send along, and it can be a little bit of a tedious process, although it does work well. But so the approach with relation stubs that will have implementations for that already, so you have a defined programmatic API that you can just read the documentation for that, use directly in your code. The composer will pull those in for you and set them up, connect them up to your hooks semi-automatically, and then the API that I mentioned that they use ties into the reactive pattern, which I have a documentation link. And this is not quite released yet, but it's I'm hoping nearing 1.0 release. Put it in the Juju channel. But the idea is to have the relation stubs and other layers of the charm kind of communicate with each other via these things called states, where they can, once the relation conversation has reached a certain point, to where the database has been configured and set up, and It has all the authentication information available. The database relation stub can expose a state saying that the database is available. And if if the base layer charm can inspect config or other combinations of state from multiple relations, and then surface up semantically meaningful states to your base layer, so that you can have things where your base big data layer handles all of the grunt boilerplate work for you, and you just react to the state of Hadoop is now available, or Kubernetes, or whatever whatever the underlying structure is available and already in the configured state, and you don't have to worry about the nitty-gritty of how it's done. And yet the big benefit of this is even with the charm being composed from multiple layers, what you end up with is a full complete charm that uses all the same tools of Juju hooks and embedded libraries and charm code that you can go onto the charm store and read exactly what it's doing. And yet when you're maintaining it, you only have to maintain the small amount that is germane to what you're trying to accomplish. So I think it's a really cool pattern that is going to I'm hoping significantly simplify some of the more complex cases that we've run into with charms.
Marco, you had something to say?
No, I think that's really awesome. I've been kind of following the work a little bit over the last couple of days. But I think it's really awesome is looking at the docs itself, just kind of the way that you condense the kind of a lot of the stuff that's complicated in charming is kind of now made a lot easier, where you're becoming responsive instead of trying to have to plan for every single thing. You just simply say, these are the things that I'm ready to respond to, and these are the methods to fire. And I also am super appreciative that there is, not only is there something for native Python, which looks a lot like what we've seen with previous frameworks that are written in Python charms, but the fact that you have non-Python reactive handlers, I think that's super sweet.
Yeah, I realize I probably should have screen shared at least this overview documentation of what the reactive part of a reactive charm would look like. So you can see that it's a decorator. This is Python. You've got your decorator that says when these states are available, do this. When this file has been updated, you can restart the service. So it's very kind of declarative, and yet I think easy to follow. And then what Marco was talking about here is a very similar charm, basically the same charm in Bash, and you can see that it follows a very similar pattern where we use a type of decorator that I was able to come up with even in Bash to have the same declarative sort of syntax. So.
Very, very awesome.
Cool.
All right, that's all I got.
All right, Corey, do us a favor and post that URL in the IRC channel so people get it in the logs.
I did, yes.
Okay, and Marco wants to go next.
Well, just to make sure we follow the train, because we have a lot of stuff to talk about. I want to talk about a bunch of stuff that's happened on the developer experience side this last month.
Yeah.
Which was left out of the intro, but it's a giant surprise. Not nearly as exciting as some of the stuff that's been happening in the other communities, but one thing that we have been working on is this concept of benchmarking. I've talked about it a whole bunch the last several of these kind of, what are these, office hours. That's kind of finally come to a head. We've launched a site last week or the week before, cloud-benchmarks.org, where we've taken the idea of benchmarking, which we've talked about previously, and kind of applied it so that you can actually start benchmarking and sharing results across different clouds. And we wrote a blog post about comparing Cassandra write performance on GC and AWS and the ways to reproduce those things. So I just wanted to show real quickly what that would look like from a user who wants to run a benchmark and then look at results before going over the last couple things. So I'm going to try to share my screen here. I don't know if this is actually going to work or not.
You gotta join the Hangout.
I am in the Hangout.
Okay, wait 1 second.
The thing is I'm talking on your mic. Mute yourself, and I'll talk on mine.
Okay,
Yeah.
All right. Turn your sound up.
All right. Hopefully that worked. And you all can see my screen now. So this is exactly, well, it's not exactly, but it's pretty close to the benchmarks that we set up. It's just not as large of instances. These are all in the standard Juju size instances. But this is a kind of example of what you can expect from benchmarking. So what we have is a Juju GUI, as well as a 3-node Cassandra cluster and a Cassandra stress benchmark charm. As well, we have a benchmark GUI, which I'll show you what that looks like in a second, and just MongoDB just to kind of show a variety of different services. So what you can do with Juju is you can run Juju action do Cassandra bench of stress. And we're going to run that on the 0 node, and then we're going to say stress. And we're just going to use the default options, but there's a whole set of options, which I'll show you in a second for this charm and how to tweak them. You have to spell things properly. It's very important. So what you'll do is you'll see Juju action, also the Juju state change a little bit. We're using, in our Cassandra stress charm, as well as the Cassandra charm that Stuart Bishop wrote, we're using a lot of the new status stuff for Juju, so we can see that the workload's active. It's currently stressing the Cassandra cluster. We can kind of see that progress so we know what's going on from a state standpoint. The Cassandra action itself shows a whole bunch of different things. So Juju action defined the schema for Cassandra stress. There are a variety of different parameters you can modify to tweak and tune how you wish to actually show Cassandra running, to stress Cassandra. By default, it does a write test using local one consistency with these error, max, and min rates, and then it does 10,000 operations. In our benchmarking, we were doing 2 million operations at a time, and that's where we got the numbers that we were producing. But what's also nice is that you also get a benchmark GUI, which is this first line here, which says as its status to use me and gives me the address. So I'm going to show you what that looks like and what that does for you, for anyone who's writing or running benchmarks, trying to reproduce these results or otherwise. Let me find a browser. So I'm just going to paste that URL into here. And what you get is a very, I would say simple, but it shows you a state of all the actions that are running or have run in that environment. In which case, we've run a bunch of benchmarks previously, which I would show you, but I have to reshare my terminal again. So what's great is that while this one's running, and it should be done in just a few more minutes, this page will update live with changes, but we can see kind of the data that was run previously. So this was a MongoDB instance. You can see the parameters that were ran for this MongoDB instance, the constraints that were run in it, and then the results that we got back from that. Its main result was something in the order of, what is that? 10,893,000 something operations a second, and then kind of the rest of the detailed results that comprise that. Oh, it failed. Why? Why would you do this during a demo? So I have to figure out why this failed, but when benchmarks are successful, like these here, you'll be able to publish them to the Cloud Benchmarks portal, and then when you go to cloudbenchmarks.org, thank you. If you go to the submissions and results page, you'll see the benchmarks that you've submitted as well as what other people have submitted. So it's a great way for you to start looking at results. I think we just submitted this one. Kind of breaks down what was in here. It was MongoDB. MongoDB is its own benchmark. Shows you this result, comparisons with other clouds, the top results in those clouds as well, and then how to reproduce this result. So if you run this bundle using the quick start command, and then rerun this Juju action line, which will reproduce all of the defaults that were created at the time, or parameters, you can test this against any of your providers, whether it's on bare metal, if you want to get a benchmark for how your bare metal compares with the cloud, or your cloud, or even if you want to see how well your laptop can spin up instances for a comparison of performance for what developers are using versus what you're running live. That's kind of what we've done with this Cloud Benchmark site, and we'll be writing more blog posts in the next couple of weeks, going further into the Cassandra benchmark more, then also benchmarking other services and showing how you can easily repeat all of those benchmarks and encapsulate all that goodness and what tuning and tweaking options, what size instances work best, all those repeatable and robust goodness for benchmarking. So I just wanted to touch on that. That's something that we launched. You can switch back.
Okay.
Something we launched recently.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
Now you got to put this back while I'm on here, though. So that's benchmarking and cloudbenchmarks.org. I'll put links out to those. We've got anyone that's using either Juju 123, we recommend 124, can start playing with this stuff. It's pretty easy to get started. Outside of that, we're lining up several other updates to major tools: Amulet, Juju Deployer, Charm tools. So we've been spending a lot of time since this release of Cloud Benchmarks to go through and triage bugs, supply patches, review code that other people have submitted. So if you've been having a problem with running Amulet tests or running Juju Deployer or running the Charm testing infrastructure, expect updates for those to be emailed to the list in the next week or two. That's all we have from the Charm development tool experience.
Awesome. Anything core-wise? I know we had a point release.
Oh, yeah, we did have a point release. The latest stable release of Juju is 124.3. In that release, there was mostly bug fixes. It mostly revolved around... I've managed to lose my browser. Mostly revolved around fixing the Juju upgrade process. So if you were on a previous release of Juju and you noticed some issues with upgrading to 124, that's been resolved. A lot of those have been resolved in this release of Juju. I'll see if there's anything else worth highlighting from a bug, but it was a point release, meaning it was just a simple bug patch release for Juju. So upgrading to it should be safe. Upgrade Juju should now work as well. So if you're running in those environments, you may want to do so. Juju release notes. I'll leave a link to this as well in the IRC channel for 124.3. Upgrade failures, some rsyslog stuff, fixing debug log of the local provider, some updates about state servers and tool migrations, Bootstrap failing, Bootstrap and Juju hanging. There was a memory leak that was addressed, and some cloud-specific fixes were also addressed in there. So very minor as far as the scope of features, but it does fix a lot of bugs that were outstanding in the 124 series.
Okay, great. And with that, that's pretty much everything else. We got a new stable release. Everyone's updating stuff. We got benchmarks. We got cubes.
There is this week.
Yeah,
this week we should be getting a beta for 125. This week.
Yes. A bunch of people on the team are sprinting in France, so I don't know if the release will actually go up.
Well, it will be happening very soon. We should. By the time we have one of the office hour, we'll have a 125 beta out. Talk about features.
Absolutely. My favorite feature on that one is you won't need storage on your cloud to run Juju, so that means we'll be able to run on DreamHost and a whole bunch of other clouds. Hopefully.
Really?
For those people who
no more buckets needed? No more.
No sir. No sir.
All right.
I know. So, and with that, thank you very much for those of you listening in. Our next office hours is going to be August 20th. That's a little less than a month away. Join us, and you'll always find our videos on jujucharms.com/videos, or just in the Ubuntu On Air channel here on YouTube. Like us if you like the video, send us feedback. If there's any topic you want us to cover, please feel free to let us know. With that, everybody have a good Friday tomorrow, and then a nice long weekend. In the meantime, I'm putting him back to work. Have a good day, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. We'll see you guys later. Stop. Yeah, I'm trying.
Come on, man. Click the mouse.
Hold up.
Just press the button.